So we've done this a few times now, mostly during the summer, and this is the first time we've done it during the winter. And snowbirds ask difficult questions. Is the lesson that I'm learning. The questions this year were really fantastic, and so they all, as usual, kind of work their way into their own sort of groupings and loose categories. So we'll try to answer as many as we can. Some wound up being outliers, and if we have time, we'll do a lightning round at the end where I'll answer those quickly. But the first question has to do with sort of a social justice angle. The questions are, how does a person who believes in the UU principles manage to forgive for terrible acts against others? And describe the intersection of where tolerance intersects with behaviors that are harmful to others. Also, the religious, why do Unitarian Universalists, why are we reluctant to proclaim our religion as a basis for our stance on social issues? Why? And finally, why is there a gap between the world we want and the world we have? So these all kind of group together. And, you know, the answers to every single question you ask is, I don't know. I'm not certain. But this is what I'm thinking right now. So, forgiveness. I guess, how do we forgive people who are acting terribly, doing violence to other people? And I would say that actually forgiveness has no impact on their action anyway. Forgiveness is about yourself. So you can forgive somebody for doing something. You can, for me, the excellent lesson on forgiveness comes from the Bible, comes from the book of Mark. And Jesus walked around noticing, not giving people, but noticing that they were forgiven. He would say affiente, which means you're forgiven. It doesn't mean I forgive you. It means you are already forgiven. So when I think about forgiveness, it's about and by the way, the key part of that is that affiente translates to letting go of. So you just let go of whatever that hatred is in you, because you're forgiving somebody. If you need to forgive somebody, you've got some anger, some ill will towards them, and that's coming back on you. It's actually not doing much of anything to stop them from doing what they're doing. So you can forgive and still keep being opposed. You can forgive and be opposed. Forgive. Yeah. So, and the tolerance part, for me, that's a bit harder, because I do think there's a limit to, we're not expected to tolerate everything. I don't think that's in our principles. We are a tolerant people because, as a result of the fact that we recognize the inherent worth and dignity of all people, even the jerks. We recognize their inherent worth and dignity in the hope that our recognition of the best in them will call the best in them out. And then, if we need to, after that, we forgive them. But if they're doing something that is intolerable, we never stop fighting. We never set down our opposition. That opposition can take a number of different forms. But we have a limit to tolerance. So why aren't we, as UUs, basing our response to some situations out of claiming our religious heritage and tradition as a basis for making these decisions? I think it's two things. I think a lot of times we have values for the principles. Where have you been all my life? You were already sort of living these principles, or at least being called by them, appreciating them already. You see them in one document, you say yes. So in some ways that causes us to sort of say, well, I was already this way. And so when you say we don't base our actions out of our religious tradition. However, there's a real power. There's a real power in basing your actions out of your religious tradition. And I'm reminded of for instance, the bumper sticker, WWJD, what would Jesus do? So I've developed another one. I told this to Katie. She didn't think it was that funny, but I think it's fantastic. We should have a bumper sticker that says WITUURTTS. And then you would have an asterisk and it would say what it was. And it's, what is the Unitarian Universalist response to this situation? First of all, it's one of my favorite words, response instead of reaction, right? What is our response? And then you can say, as a UU, I do not tolerate what you're doing, but I recognize your inherent worth and dignity. Abraham, you're fine. And as a UU, I take this stand in social justice, I take this stand in justice, and I forgive you. I have the power to forgive you, to let that go in myself, and then continue on in this relationship, be it oppositional or otherwise. So, and why is the gap between the reality and the beloved community that we seek? And I think there are two reasons for that. One of them is practical, one of them is theological. The theological is that it never happens. Or, we live sort of in what theologians call the now and the not yet. We live as if paradise were here, as if the beloved community was here. We live as if that were true so that we can treat each other appropriately. But in fact, we also let it call us ever on, because it's never here. It never is here. We're flawed creatures creating flawed societies. The beloved community is always elusive, but it calls us. The other reason why it's not here is because we haven't worked hard enough.
In your gray hymnal, let us please turn to number 170. We are a gentle, angry people.
Singing for
next group of questions falls into what you might call Unitarian Universalist religiosity. How we do what we do, especially on Sunday mornings. Are there limits to what a Unitarian Universalist can believe and still call him or herself a Unitarian Universalist? Couples nicely with, is there still a place for agnostics and atheists in Unitarian Universalism? I would say yes, there is a limit to what a Unitarian Universalist can believe and still call himself or herself a Unitarian Universalist. I'm not sure where that limit is. For me, basically, I don't know, and if you are one, talk to me. Let me know how you do it, because if you're a Trinitarian Christian, I think that might be difficult to be in a Unitarian Universalist. But I think there are Trinitarian Christians, maybe even in our congregation. But it goes back to the very beginning. Unitarians they were in a big argument with the Trinitarians, who thought the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost were indwelling one thing, three in one. And we said, our ancestors said, nope, we only see one deity. And of course, we've evolved quite a bit since then. Our tent has grown quite a bit bigger. Some people certainly are Christian Unitarians, and right, I said that right. And but if you're a Trinitarian, I feel like, wow, that's right at the edge. And the way back in some ways, is through that Unitarian idea of everything is related, everything is interconnected. So that, for instance, if you are a polytheist, it's funny because a lot of UUs have trouble with, like, they're good with atheists, agnostics, Buddhists, little trouble with Christianity. But if you're a polytheist, it's okay. That's a bit odd for me. But so polytheism is another one where it's a little bit, that's an edge. It's not a sharp edge, but it is a place where it starts to get, let's ask some questions. And that's the exciting place to be, by the way, is the part where you're asking questions too. So those are some limits. And of course, the obvious stuff, you can't believe that, doing harm to people is good and religiously based. Is there a place for agnostics and atheists and Unitarian Universalists? I certainly hope so. And I believe that there is. I consider myself either one of those on any given day. I like to say that if I'm in a room full of Christians, I'm an atheist. If I'm in a room full of atheists, I'm a Christian. It makes it more interesting and is in some ways actually honest, because I guess that what that makes me is agnostic. So if there's no room for agnostics, I'm in trouble. But I also think that we are in a place historically, theologically, where certainly as a movement, maybe even as a culture, we're moving beyond the atheist, theist question. That those to me are really just questions of language, about explaining certain things and answering certain questions that we have, and they're just they wind up being metaphorical answers to these questions. So for me, the question, I will use theistic language. I'm okay with that, and I know some of you aren't, but I've wrestled with that enough to be okay with it. And also, I don't think I use theistic language very often. So I like to answer these. We as Unitarian Universalists have the opportunity to answer these questions from a lot of different facets, a lot of different metaphors, and a lot of different languages, metaphorical languages. And so I say, let's do that, because the more windows on the truth that we can get, the closer to it we'll get. And why do we, same thing, why do we say words like prayer and salvation? They carry a cultural weight to them and gravitas. They do carry along with that some baggage. So I like to do what I can to cut away the baggage, keep the gravitas. And there's not a whole lot of other words that I can think of that do what those words do. What are we worshiping is a question. Worship goes back to a Norse or something word, worth Skype, which means things of worth, acknowledging things of worth. So when we come together, we are acknowledging things of worth, primarily our values. Now the next question is about idolatry. Is it possible to avoid idolatry? Is it possible to make idols of our values even? That is a good question. Is it possible to avoid idolatry? I don't know. I think so, and I think it's a good exercise to strive to avoid idolatry. But I also think it captures us and brings us back. All due respect, I know some people don't like me whacking this bowl because it's disrespectful to the Buddhist tradition. Is that idolatry? I mean, it's a bowl. It makes a noise when you whack it. I'm treating it religiously for our purposes. I also understand the religious tradition that it came out of. So maybe one question is there a positive place for idolatry? Maybe we should make mini idols of things and truly treat them with respect. So I don't know, that's a compelling question that I don't have an answer to, but I'm happy to talk about more and more, but I can't because we have to sing a song.